Welcome to the Blue Oasis podcast. This is the podcast for finding peace and prosperity, learning the history of hobbies, as well as developing a little side hustle. If you want to find peace and prosperity in your life, this is your show. Get ready. You're listening to the Blue Oasis podcast. I am your host, Adam Rothstein. All right, let's get to the show. And welcome back to the Blue Oasis podcast. I am your host, Adam Rothstein. With me today is Tyler Kania. Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So, tell me a little about yourself.
Well, I'm 32 years old. I play rugby when I'm healthy. I'm probably the only person you've ever met that's ruptured both of their patellar tendons. It's a really rare injury. It happens once for every 147,000 human years, and I've done it to both my knees. So that's been tough to overcome on the rugby field. But in addition to that, I suffer from bipolar 1 disorder. So I get manic episodes and I get severe suicidal depression. So my life can be a bit of a roller coaster, but I've made the best out of it. And, I just recently came out with a book called The Maniac with No Knees. And right now it's, best selling in 3 different categories on Amazon. So I'm really excited about it.
I have to ask you, how do you get a book to be bestseller on Amazon?
I guess a lot of friends, a lot of people bought my book right out of the gate, right? We're not like a bestseller, but in terms of new releases in psychology, we're a bestseller. In terms of new releases in rugby books, we're a bestseller. And in terms of new releases in cryptocurrency books, we're a bestseller. And I worked hard for it. I used to be a salesman, and so a lot of writers don't have that sort of gene where they're going out and they're emailing libraries and bookstores. But, that's something that I'm fortunate to have, thankfully.
Absolutely. And I reached out with my podcast and my socials and everything in between to sell 900 audiobooks. So I get it in a little bit of the sense. Hey, so on a day-to-day basis, how do you deal with bipolar issues?
Um, yeah, I mean, it can be hard because, life can be pretty normal for long periods of time, until it's not. I'm thankful that I have medication in my life now. I wake up, I take mood stabilizers, and I take um, them again. I take stabilizers in the morning, and I take naltrexone for alcohol abuse in the morning as well. And then in the evening, I take antipsychotics and more mood stabilizers. So, medication's a big part about staying healthy, but um, day to day, I still struggle with depression, struggle with severe anxiety, struggle with substance abuse tendencies. So it's not like I'm through the woods just yet, but thankfully, my day-to-day life today is a lot better than it was, before I was diagnosed and before I was medicated, because at that point, life is just so crazy. A manic episode can screw up everything that you've ever built in minutes. It's crazy how destructive it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. When were you diagnosed? What age?
Not until I was 30. Bipolar disorder is something that can be really tough to diagnose because it typically doesn't manifest until someone's mid-20s. For me, I was showing symptoms probably around 22. And there was, an 8-year period where it was really frustrating to not really have an explanation for my behavior or an explanation for why I was feeling a certain way. Um, so it came late, but it came when I needed it most. So I'm thankful for that.
Absolutely. Um, I'm autistic. So I get it. I mean, like it is just hard to interact with people at times. Do you have trouble interacting with, people? Do you get agitated at things at times?
I can definitely get agitated. I do a good job of, trying to put on my best face and, you know, showing people a certain side of me. And a lot of people had no idea that I was going through all these crazy troubles, but um, it was there. And yeah, at times, it can be really lonely to be in a conversation with someone. Um, when you've felt the way about life that I've felt at times, it can just feel like you're completely alone in a room full of 50 people. Um, like nobody can really relate to you. But that's part of why I'm coming out with this book is so that I can, you know, show the world that, you don't have to be afraid if you're bipolar or if you suffer from mental illness or um, whatever. My book is about finding my true authentic self and then being comfortable enough to share that because a lot of people with mental illness are too ashamed to share who they are, and that's too bad.
There's some things I do want to keep hidden, so I get that, but if you really get to know, but just to give you some perspective, if you really get to know me, you'll know I like narrating audiobooks. I love sports, baseball, hockey, everything. Just my just my favorites. But I mean, it's like you said, you have to get out there and just be as true to yourself as you can possibly be. Yeah.
Definitely.
So speaking of which, now I do have to ask about sports injuries in
Yeah.
particular. So you injured both your shoulders, correct?
Knees. Yeah.
Your knees, my bad. Um, how do you get back on your feet, so to speak, just after that injury and after everything and not really wearing pads um at all? How do you recover from that?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. So the first time I ruptured my patellar tendon, I had high ambitions for my rugby career at that time. Like, I wanted to play at the highest level. Um, But when I ruptured my patellar tendon, that was the first time I ever went manic. And so I lost my mind, quit my job, quit rugby, um, was broken up with and moved to Idaho and didn't really take the rehab of my knee really seriously because I was done with rugby. But after some time, I found a new passion, and that was running. And I got pretty good at running. I won a 5K in my town, and I ran the marathon 13 months after rupturing my patellar tendon. Um, but when I did get back on the rugby field, it was a little overwhelming. You have this horrific injury happen to you, and it's a little bit like taking your trauma front on and just having to deal with it because you are going to get tackled again and you are going to get into collisions again and you'll probably get hurt again. Um, so you have to do your best to train for that. Right now I'm recovering from my second ruptured patellar tendon and, I'm taking my rehab really seriously. I want to get back on the rugby field. I know that I'm not going to be able to play forever. So I'm doing all the things like weightlifting and running and doing yoga and trying to get my body in a position where, it's not just back and ready to play, but it's back and it's got armor to prevent further injury from happening. Because that's what muscle is at the end of the day. It's just armor.
Of course, of course. So when do you think a person should just quit a sport after an injury? Because I actually played a little college hockey, and and I've had injuries to knees, um, my lower back, but that was a car accident, and shoulders too. So after everything, and then I go and be the assistant coach for the junior and um, senior year. I didn't even get much playing time anyway, but is there anything that, but is there any point that you would say that a player should probably give up their sport after a certain injury or concussion?
Yeah, I think concussions are one thing for sure. I played football for years before I played rugby, and there's a lot more concussions in that sport. And at that point, you're really messing with your life because CTE is something that can really affect you a lot like a mental illness. In some ways, I've wondered whether it was a mental illness or CTE that was causing all of these behaviors. Now, it was a mental illness for me, but for others, they're going to act erratically if they've had too many concussions. They might think a lot about suicide, and God forbid they ever do that. So I think concussions are one injury where you need to hang it up after a certain point. But for me, with my knee injuries, I still have a passion for the game. I still think that I can go out there and do it at a high level. And luckily, my position isn't the most physical. I play fly half, which is basically the quarterback. I'm in charge of all the passes and the offense and the kicking, but not necessarily in charge of like the scrums and all the physicality of rugby. So I'm fortunate to have that, and I think that I can play for a good bit, a few more years unless I get another bad injury. In which case I'll probably take up coaching, to be honest. I've done coaching in my past, but I put it aside for now.
Of course, coaching is always a good, good thing to go into. So mental institutions, I did read over your Podmatch profile. I did want to get your thoughts on that and and how and how they should be ran or and uh and even some of the funding issues. So first question about that. Um, what should a person do in regards to mental institutions and when or if uh and when should a person be quote unquote instituted?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody's rock bottom is different. Um, if someone's really erratic and a danger to themselves or a danger to someone else, that's when they should be institutionalized. Um, at these places, when you're an inpatient, they don't try and heal you. They try and stabilize your condition so that you're not a threat to someone else or to yourself. And then in outpatient therapy, that's where, you actually get to heal through like group therapy and stuff like that. But definitely if someone's feeling completely lost and suicidal and, like I said, could be a threat to themselves, or to someone else, that's when they should definitely seek, long-term help. I can't hear you.
Also, did want to touch on a little bit of reading, so I have to ask about that. So you once read 300 pages in a day, is that true?
Every day for a year, basically, I read 300 pages a day.
So
Um,
I just have to ask you, you read essentially 365 books in a year, is what you're telling me.
it ended up totaling out to be about 125, but that's because several of them were epics, like 1,200 page books, 1,300 page books, stuff like that. Like I read Infinite Jest in under 3 weeks, which is the most difficult English language book.
I'm just trying to finish up Bobby Orr's autobiography right now, and I'm on like page 150 right now, and that's 280 pages. So
Yeah, once you have to, you get in this rhythm and then you can read a lot faster and you just crush through it. But, it took me some time to get a tolerance of being able to do 300 pages per day. But once I was doing it, that was all I was doing. I was laying in my bed and I didn't want to be a part of my own world, so I, went to other people's worlds and just read. And I got this pretty big, pretty fast ability at a certain point. Right now, I couldn't do that. You have to walk before you can jump.
So you gained some sort of a speed reading skill in a
I wouldn't
sense.
call it speed reading, but it was speed reading for me. I was reading faster than I was, but I was still spending 8 to 10 hours just reading every day.
I don't even know how I can do that, you know, like I don't have that much time on my hands too. But I'm
Exactly.
lucky if I can read 20 pages straight. Like that's an hour of reading for
Yeah.
me. And it's like, geez, I cannot focus on that because, we have one of these cell phones
Hmm.
and 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 we go to bed with these things next to our cheekbone every night. Most people do. I've not met anyone that has not rolled up and swiped up on Twitter or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok of all things, too.
Yeah.
I've not met a person that has not done that who has at least a smartphone. Um, so there's that though. But but you but for strategies of people trying to get to at least read a little more, do you recommend putting the cell phone out of the room and charging it,
Yeah.
and every time you have to get up, or just putting it across the room, having the alarm set, and then when a person wakes up, they have to get up and then turn off the alarm too, and then they start their day. Any
Yeah,
strategies?
I mean, for me, I didn't really want to talk to anybody. I had felt like a reject from society, and so I just kept my phone off most of the time and didn't bother with it. And I found, books that I was interested in, and I didn't read the ones that I wasn't interested in. And you get to a point where you've read so many books that you become interested in everything. And that's kind of where I ended up.
Course. I mean, you're not going to read like no one's going to be enthusiastic of reading, oh, the ninth edition of Merriam-Webster's Hicks dictionary, or the or whatever the textbook history book you got in school. Like no one's going to bed. I think I'll read this tonight instead of my Spider-Man comics or whatever.
Right.
They just don't do that. But when you actually pick a topic that you want to read, it is much more easier than ever, too. And
Hmm.
of course, so what were you into reading when you were reading 1,200 pages a
Yeah.
day?
Well, I did everything. I started with authors that I really liked. I read the complete works of Mark Twain and Kurt Vonnegut. And then, I tried different things. My brother was a big reader before me, and he had a big library that I could choose from. I got really into Leon Uris and a lot of like historical fictions where, it's set during a very interesting place and time, but the story is fictionalized. I really loved those. And, I got to that point where, okay, I wanted to challenge myself with, Infinite Jest, or I wanted to, read an epic about, Israel from the first, mention of it anywhere. And, I just kept going and, I got into that rhythm. I'm not in that rhythm right now. It's tough for me to read a book, but, at that point in my life, it was what I needed because I didn't want to be a part of the world really. But without that, I would have never been able to write a book. Never. I mean, that year of reading just gave me so many skills when it came to enhancing my communication and my vocabulary and understanding what makes a good story. And so it was a very vital part of my journey to becoming an author.
I get it too, because I've written several books that go along with the audiobooks, and then also when you're speaking it, when you have when you have the back and forth process of writing pen to paper and then reading it aloud, yeah, your communication skills are going to be going up either way. So vice versa, to my viewers and to my listeners, don't be afraid to read it out loud because that will enhance your communication skills. For fantasy books, did you read something like Lord of the Rings during that time? Did you go back to the classics?
I read Game of Thrones. I read a few different fantasies. I think I started Lord of the Rings, but I didn't finish it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I mixed it up with every different genre for the most part. I did the Harry Potter series like in a week.
Yeah, like I still can't believe that's like you did that too. Um, any John Feinstein or John Grisham, any of those guys cross
No,
your
no John Grisham, but I do like my Western books. I've read quite a bit of Western novels. Louis Amore, I think his name is.
Lewis some more? I'll have to remember that one too. Man, I could probably do a whole podcast episode on this
Mhm.
too, but uh man. Um, I guess business, let's talk. So you started a business. I have to,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean, I was fortunate out of college that my dad had a really successful cybersecurity career, and he got me a job at the largest cybersecurity company out of Israel. And then, I worked at a few different firms. Um, but, all that time I was kind of studying cryptocurrency and learning more about that. I started investing in it in 2017 and kept investing in it through all the ups and downs. And then when I was the head coach of a women's college rugby team, um, and during that time I started my own what we call a decentralized autonomous organization. Basically, it was a rugby team that was owned by its fans, and there was like a token that you got for like going to games, and there's a presence in the metaverse where you know, hopefuls that want to be on the professional team can send their highlight mixtape. And it was basically a way of restructuring all the decisions that a professional sports team has to make. So if you had certain accreditations in rugby, you would have certain authority to pick who's on the roster or who picks the starting lineup. It was a way to basically fix the governance flaws in professional sports. Like in professional football, during the time of my project, you had 32 professional football teams and only three black coaches, despite 75% of the league being black players. So basically, my endeavor was trying to fix all of these inadequacies in professional rugby and in professional sports. And a lot of people found promise in it. I took it to the largest cryptocurrency conference in North America, the Ethereum Denver conference, and I pitched it to, venture capitalists from some of the most reputable brands in the world, and to, technologists who could turn my dream into reality. And I made a huge network and I made a lot of friends. And I went back home from this event totally manic. I had lost my mind while I was there. And when you're manic, you don't see risk, you only see a goal. And so I trusted this guy online with my cryptocurrency wallet's secret phrase, and he hacked me for $450,000. Um, yeah, and that crushed me. And the next day I was supposed to coach the women's rugby team, and I showed up to practice and I was still crazy and I lost my job. And that sent me down a pretty suicidal path, to be honest.
It's rough. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it happens. I learned from it.
I guess before, wow, 25 minutes and we've gotten so much too on on books and everything. Um maybe I should ask out of all the books you read in your over a course of a year of that year, how old were you again when you read 1,200 pages again a day?
That was 2021, so I think I was 29.
And I was 27. Um, and I'm going to be 31 on February 9th.
Happy
But
birthday.
but in the year 2021, what were your top five books and what life lessons can you draw from them?
Oh God. Well, that's a tough one. Um, I liked a couple books by Amos Tversky, The Lincoln Highway and A Gentleman in Moscow. Those books were awesome. Colson Whitehead, who's another Pulitzer Prize winner. His book, The Nickel Boys, was my favorite. But he also wrote The Underground Railroad, which was really good. Um, and then Leon Uris Redemption, which is about the Irish people kind of liberating themselves from English tyranny. And I guess the last would be um, I've already mentioned it twice, but Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace is kind of like the Bible for, rejected male Americans, I think. And I really identified with it. And, I think it's the best book that I've ever read. But they've got 21,000 unique words in the book, and, it's 1,100 pages, and it's very difficult to keep track of everything. So it's not for the faint of heart by any means.
Of course, of course. Okay, before I wrap it up here, do you have anything you would like? Well, your book, just your book, and do you want your socials or anything mentioned?
Yeah, yeah, check out my book, The Maniac with No Knees. It's doing well, like I mentioned, but could always use more readers. I think it's for everybody that is looking for a story of resilience and inspiration. I think it can inform the general public more about mental illness, and I think it can be a companion to those that suffer from mental illness to help them make them not feel so alone. So definitely check out my book. Um, if you want to follow my journey on Instagram, that's where I publish all my short essays first. Every day I usually come out with a short essay about mental illness or about suicide or about substance abuse or about something. And I also share, what's going on in the journey of my book. So that's kind of my headquarters. You can follow me at Tyler_Kania. That's spelled Kania. And yeah, otherwise, besides that, I have a website, tylerkania.com. So yeah, check me out anywhere.
Okay, and you can be sure to message me with the links on Podmatch too.
Okay.
Okay, and before I wrap it up for the final time, the best way to support this podcast is by buying the audiobooks. So, if you like baseball, I have Growing Baseball. If you like hockey, I have Growing Hockey. If you need some guidance, um, you can check out my audiobook Determination, The Power of Resilience, um, as well. So you have that there. That's available on audiobooks.com. And of course, Chess the Game for Peace and Prosperity. Uh, you can get that. That's the cheapest one. So it's all good. And if you Uh, okay, and let me make a little correction too. Determination, harnessing the power of resilience. That's the actual title. I spoke too soon. So that's the one that is, if you want to develop positive thinking, check out that one too. So that's going to be a great choice for you there. So the audiobooks are linked down there. My Substack's down there. Like this podcast, rate this 5 stars, share it with all your friends, spread it everywhere. Write me a little review. Let me know what you think. And with that being said, peace out.